before light knew itself, before the gods drew their first breath. Consciousness itself awakened, and in that infinite stillness, Shiva emerged, not born but manifested. The eternal principle of transformation, the cosmic force that dances at the edge of all existence. From his third eye came fire. From his being came purpose, and when the cosmos needed a protector, Shiva became the destroyer. But even the mightiest god does not stand alone. When chaos threatened to consume all existence, when the world itself hung on the edge of annihilation, an ancient serpent, Vasuki, the king of serpents, performed a penance so profound that even Shiva bent to witness it. This is not a tale of distant gods. This is the story of sacrifice, of alliance forged in darkness, of the compassion hidden within the fires of creation and destruction. This is Shiva. Let's begin. There is a god who once burned desire itself to ash with a single glance. A god who pressed down the 10-headed king of Lanka with nothing but the weight of his toe. A god who fought his own son, cut off a head of the creator of the universe, and went to war against death. He is known as the Destroyer, the Ascetic, the god who meditates on a frozen mountain for 1,000 years. But behind that stillness is a warrior whose battles reshape the cosmos. Long ago, 3 Asura brothers received a boon that seemed unbreakable. They built 3 flying cities, one of gold, one of silver, one of iron, that could only be destroyed when perfectly aligned once every 1,000 years. For ages, the Devas were helpless against them, their combined power invincible. In desperation, they approached Shiva himself. The god mounted a chariot built from the very fabric of existence. The earth became its base. The sun and moon served as wheels. Vishnu transformed into the arrow, and Brahma himself became the charioteer. When the moment came and the 3 cities aligned in a single instant, Shiva released that arrow. The universe itself became his weapon. The cities burned. The Asuras were annihilated. This was the destruction of Tripura. But Shiva's greatest battles had only begun. One demon born from his own rage, Jalandhara, pulled from the waters when Shiva's fury struck the ocean, rose to power, and demanded Parvati as his own. The war that followed brought Devas and Asuras into collision. Jalandhara seemed invincible, protected by the unshakable chastity of his wife, Vrinda. Only through deception, Vishnu disguising himself as Jalandhara to break her vow, could Shiva finally pierce him with his chakra. Even the destroyer must bend the rules when cosmic order hangs in balance. Another demon, Andaka, born blind from birth, harbored only arrogance and desire for the goddess. When he attacked Shiva, a terrible problem emerged. Every drop of Andaka's blood that touched the ground spawned a new demon. Shiva summoned the 7 mother goddesses, the Matrikas, who drank the blood before it could fall to earth. They became the guardians born from that terrible necessity. Andaka himself was finally pierced on Shiva's trident, suspended between life and death, eventually transformed through penance into a devoted follower. From devastation came lasting cosmic consequence. Gajasura, the elephant demon who had performed such fierce penance that he grew arrogant in his power, ran wild across the worlds. When the Devas cried out, Shiva appeared and danced. That dance became the demon's death. From the elephant's hide, Shiva fashioned his own cloak, a trophy, and a warning woven into his very form. But perhaps the most profound battle was one that never truly ended. The god of love and desire, Kama, was sent by the other gods to pierce Shiva's meditation. After Sati's death, the gods grew desperate. They needed Shiva to remarry and father a son strong enough to defeat Tarakasura. So Kama arrived in the forest and loosed an arrow of flowers at Shiva's heart. The god's eyes opened in fury. His third eye blazed. Kama was reduced to ash before his own wife, Rati's eyes. But Shiva's rage contained mercy. He restored Kama in formless spirit, calling him Ananga, the bodiless one. Love endured, transformed, but never truly destroyed. In the Himalayas, Arjuna sought divine weapons for the coming war. Shiva, testing the warrior's devotion, disguised himself as a humble hunter. When a boar appeared, both fired at once. Neither would yield the claim of the kill. What began as argument became combat. Hand to hand, warrior against god in disguise. Exhausted and humbled, Arjuna finally recognized whom he fought. Shiva, pleased by his courage and unwavering spirit, revealed his true form and granted him the Pashupatastra, the ultimate weapon. Daksha's contempt for Shiva burned like poison. When the great yajna began, Shiva himself was deliberately insulted, humiliated before all the gods. Sati chose immolation rather than bear the shame. Shiva's grief turned to rage so pure, it tore reality itself. From a lock of his hair, Virabhadra was born, a being so terrifying that even the gods trembled and begged for mercy. The yajna was torn apart. Daksha's head fell, but then came mercy. Daksha was revived with the head of a goat. Destruction followed by grace. Always, even the 10-headed king of Lanka learned this lesson. Ravana, in his arrogance, attempted to lift the mountain Kailash itself, to carry it away to Lanka. Shiva simply pressed down with his toe. The weight was absolute. Ravana was trapped beneath that mountain for centuries, his cries of pain transforming into the first composition of the Shiva Tandava Stotram, a hymn born from agony and devotion. When finally released, he emerged not with punishment, but with a sword, a boon from a god who destroys and gives in the same breath. Even death itself bowed to Shiva's will. The sage Markandeya was destined to die at 16. He spent his short life in complete devotion to Shiva, worshipping a lingam without pause. When Yama arrived to claim his soul, the boy clung to that stone form. Shiva emerged in fury at the intrusion upon his devotee. He struck death itself. Time halted. Markandeya was granted eternal youth, the message eternal. That true devotion can move even the God who governs the end of all things. From burning 3 cities in a single instant to stopping death with his own foot, these are not merely tales of violence. Each battle ends the same way. Destruction followed by mercy, fury followed by grace. That is the real nature of the destroyer. Not chaos, but the force that clears the way for something new to begin. From burning 3 cities to kicking death itself. Shiva. Battles teach us something modern storytellers forget. That power without mercy is tyranny, and mercy without power is powerlessness. The Destroyer contains both. How many of these stories did you already know? How many shocked you? How many will you carry forward? This is why we tell these stories. Not to escape into fantasy, but to understand something true about ourselves, about destruction and renewal, rage and grace, endings and beginnings. If you're hungry for more of these deep cinematic dives into Hindu mythology, if you want to explore the stories that built an entire civilization, hit that subscribe button, join thousands of people who come here to witness the sacred narratives that shaped history. Like this video, share it. Let these stories reach someone else who needs to hear them. And in the comments below, I want to know. What is your favorite battle of Shiva? What do you think it means? Start a conversation. Build this community with me. We are just beginning. Om Namah Shivaya.
There is a moment recorded in the oldest scriptures of India when the universe came within seconds of ending. Not by war, not by fire, not by the collapse of stars, by a color. Witnesses describe the sky itself darkening as if the sun had been extinguished. The oceans began to boil without fire beneath them. Every god in the heavens stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. because the substance rising in front of them was not meant to exist in a universe that wanted to survive. It was called Hala Hala, the Kalakuta poison. And ancient texts say a single drop could have unmade creation itself. Only one being stepped forward to face it, not the strongest warrior among the gods, not the king of heaven, a hermit god who had been sitting in silence on a mountain, uninvolved in the affairs of the world that was about to end without him. He did not ask for permission. He did not wait for a plan. He drank it, and the poison stopped, trapped forever in his throat, turning it permanently, visibly blue. To this day, across 1 billion devotees, he is called by the name this single act gave him, Nilkanth, the blue-throated one. But here is what almost no one asks. Why was the poison there at all? Why were the gods, the supposedly all-powerful architects of the universe, standing helpless at the edge of their own annihilation, gambling everything on an ocean they didn't understand? The answer begins not with a war between gods and demons. It begins with an insult, a garland, and the day the King of Heaven proved that even gods can lose everything. Long before the poison, long before the ocean was touched, there walked upon the earth a sage named Durvasa, a man so volatile, so consumed by inner fire, that even the word forgiveness was said to be foreign to his nature. He did not walk among men to teach patience. He walked among them as a test. One day, deep in the forest, Durvasa crossed paths with a celestial nymph carrying a garland of Santanaka flowers, blooms so divine that their fragrance alone was said to draw every living creature toward them. The sage, struck by their beauty, asked for the garland. She gave it without hesitation. Durvasa wore it briefly, and then, walking the earth still, he saw something in the distance. Indra, king of heaven, riding his great white elephant Airavata, surrounded by the full procession of the gods. In that instant, the sage did something no ordinary being would dare. He removed the garland from his own head and threw it, not as an offering, but as a gift, toward the king of the heavens. Indra caught it, and for a moment it rested on Airavata's crown like a second halo, the divine fragrance rolling across the elephant like mist off a mountain. Then the elephant, maddened by the scent, simply threw it to the ground and trampled it. Silence fell across the procession, because what Indra had just witnessed, without realizing it, was not an accident. It was the single costliest 3 seconds in the history of the heavens. Durvasa's fury did not rise. It detonated. "You are drunk on your own glory, Indra," he said. "That garland was not a decoration. It was power itself, offered to you freely, and you let it be thrown into the dirt like refuse. So hear this. Everything you possess across the 3 worlds, I take it from you now." Indra fell from his elephant, prostrating himself, begging forgiveness. But Durvasa was not a sage known for mercy. "I have no gentleness in me," he said, "only fire, and that fire is now yours to burn in." He turned and walked away, and with him walked something invisible, something no army could see leaving, but every soul in the 3 worlds would soon feel disappear. What Durvasa took from Indra was not a possession. It was something scriptures call Shri, glory, radiance, the invisible force that makes power mean something. And its disappearance did not stay in the palace of the gods. It spread. Sacred fires that had burned for generations flickered and died. Ascetics who had meditated for decades simply stood up and walked away from their penance, their focus scattering like smoke. Ordinary people who once gave freely to temples and to each other began, without knowing why, to hoard, to hesitate, to look at their neighbor with suspicion instead of warmth. The scriptures describe it with brutal precision. Where there is no virtue, wealth does not remain. And where wealth does not remain, strength does not remain either. Think about what that actually means for a moment. This was not a curse that struck like lightning and vanished. It was slower and in some ways crueler. A rot that worked its way through the foundations of 3 entire worlds before anyone could name what was happening. Kings who had ruled with wisdom began making decisions out of fear. Households that had once shared freely began locking their doors. Even the language people used with one another began to shift. The Asuras, the eternal rivals of the gods, noticed first. They didn't need scriptures to tell them something had changed. They could see it in the eyes of Indra's warriors. The shine was gone. The gods, who had once seemed untouchable, now looked, for the first time in an eternity, breakable. So the Asuras attacked. And the war that followed was not close. The gods, stripped of their radiance, their confidence, their unity, were pushed back on every front. Weapons that had once channeled divine force now felt like ordinary metal in their hands. One by one, the outposts of heaven fell. Indra, humiliated a second time in the same year, gathered what remained of the defeated gods and did the only thing left to do. He went to Brahma, the creator, and confessed everything. Brahma listened to the full account: the garland, the curse, the collapse of glory, the invasion, the defeat, and did not offer comfort. He offered a direction. "There is only one being who can undo this," he said. "Go to Narayana. He is the source from which creation flows, the force that sustains it, and the power that will end it when its time comes. He is beyond cause itself. He will protect you, but only if you are willing to hear what he asks of you." The gods traveled to the shores of the Kshira Sagara, the ocean of milk, and there, through devotion and prayer, Vishnu appeared before them, calm, discus, and mace in hand, radiant in a way that made even defeated gods remember what glory once felt like. But what he told them was not what they expected. "The Asuras," Vishnu said, "are, for this moment in time, favored by fate itself. You cannot defeat them as you are, so do not try. Instead, make peace with them. Sometimes, to accomplish what truly matters, you must ally yourself with your enemy. This is not weakness, it is strategy. Let them believe this is their victory too." He gave them the plan that would become one of the most staggering cooperative undertakings in the entire mythology of India. Churn the ocean itself, using Mount Mandara as the churning rod and the serpent king Vasuki as the rope. And from its depths would rise Amrita, the nectar of immortality. "The Asuras will do the heavy labor," Vishnu warned, "but the reward will come to you. If they demand something along the way, give it to them without resistance. Peace accomplishes what conflict cannot. And when the poison rises from the depths, because it will, do not panic. Do not desire anything you see in that ocean. Not power, not treasure, not even the nectar itself. Desire is what will destroy you here." Then without another word he vanished, because gods who plan too visibly are gods whose plans can be stopped. The gods walked, unarmed, deliberately vulnerable, into the court of Bali, king of the Asuras, who had already conquered all three worlds and sat upon a throne surrounded by his generals, Shambhara, Arishtanemi, the warriors of Tripura. For a moment it nearly ended before it began. Bali's generals moved to seize the gods on sight, but Bali himself, cunning, disciplined, a ruler who understood the difference between a threat and an opportunity, stopped them. He listened, and when Indra repeated, almost word for word, the strategy Vishnu had given him, the promise of immortality, the appeal to unity, the logic that even enemies must sometimes labor toward the same summit, Bali agreed, not out of trust, out of ambition. He wanted what was in that ocean as badly as they did. An alliance was struck between beings who had been trying to destroy each other for eternities. And together, gods and demons, side by side, they turned toward the sea. They tore Mount Mandara from the earth and dragged it to the shore. They convinced Vasuki, king of serpents, to wrap his own body around it as the churning rope, promising him a share of what the ocean would give up. Then came the first argument, a small, almost comedic detail that the text refused to leave out. The Asuras, proud of their lineage and their knowledge of the scriptures, refused to hold the serpent's tail. "The tail is inauspicious," they said. "We are warriors of noble blood. We will not be insulted this way." Vishnu, who had positioned himself at the serpent's head alongside the gods, simply smiled and switched sides without a word of complaint, letting the Asuras take the head they wanted and leaving the lesser position to himself and the Devas. It did not matter to him where he stood. It only mattered that the churning began, and it did, violently, almost immediately, catastrophe. Mount Mandara, with no foundation beneath it, began to sink into the ocean floor under its own colossal weight. Every god and demon straining at the rope watched their entire plan disappear beneath the waves in real time. There was no army in creation strong enough to hold up a mountain from underwater. For a long moment, nothing anyone did mattered. Devas pulled, Asuras pulled, and Mount Mandara simply kept descending, inch by inch, dragging the entire alliance's only chance at immortality down into darkness with it. Some of the Asura generals, half a breath from giving up entirely, began shouting that this had been a trap from the beginning, that the gods had lured them here to drown alongside a worthless mountain instead of a real war. So Vishnu became something else. He took the form of Kurma, a tortoise of such impossible scale that his shell alone was said to span 100,000 yojanas, and dove beneath the sinking mountain, catching its full weight on his back like a foundation stone underneath the ocean floor itself. The mountain steadied. The churning resumed, Devas and Asuras hauling in opposite directions, the friction of the rope generating heat and light across the surface of the sea. The ocean gave up its poison first. Hala Hala, the Kalakuta poison, rising from the depths of the very ocean they had chosen to disturb, threatening to unmake every single being standing at its edge. God, demon, and the balance of creation itself, all in one breath. This is the moment we open with. Now you know how they got here. Every god and demon who had marched into this alliance with dreams of immortality now stood paralyzed in front of the possibility of universal extinction instead. And it was Shiva, silent until this exact moment, uninvolved in the politics of the churning, who understood what none of them could bring themselves to say out loud. Someone has to take this, or nothing survives. He drank it. His throat turned blue. The universe did not end, and with the greatest threat behind them, the churning resumed once more, until finally the ocean released what they had come for. Amrita, the nectar of immortality itself, rising into the light. Instantly, the fragile alliance collapsed. Asuras and Devas surged toward the pot at the same moment, the truce forgotten the second the prize appeared. So Vishnu intervened one final time, becoming Mohini, a form of such overwhelming beauty that both armies fell silent simply looking at her. She offered to distribute the nectar fairly, and in the haze of her presence, the Asuras agreed to let her decide the order. She gave every drop to the gods. Not one drop reached the Asuras. By the time the enchantment broke and the Asuras understood what had happened, the balance of the universe had already been restored, permanently by design, exactly as Vishnu intended from the very first word he spoke on the shore of that ocean. There is only one temple in India dedicated entirely to Vishnu's tortoise form, the one who held the weight of a sinking mountain, and with it, the weight of the entire churning. It is called Sri Kurmanath Temple, standing in the village of Sri Kurmam, in the Srikakulam district of Andhra Pradesh. Local tradition holds that the temple's origins trace back thousands of years, and that the deity enshrined within was not carved by human hands but Svayambhu, self-manifested, risen from the earth itself. Even its architecture refuses to choose a side, the way Vishnu once refused to choose a side of the serpent. North Indian temples rise in tall spires. South Indian temples layer themselves like pyramids. Sri Kurmanath does both. A Dravidian Vimana roofline, built with the depth and detail of Kalinga craftsmanship underneath. Every year on Magha Purnima, thousands of pilgrims arrive here, drawn, they say, to a place where history, faith, and myth are still standing in the same stones. So the next time you hear the story of the gods retold as if they were always powerful, always certain, always untouchable, remember this instead. They lost everything over a garland. They allied with their enemies to survive, and the universe itself came within one throat of ending. The gods were not born gods before the gods. They were made, the same way everything worth remembering is made. Through the moment they nearly lost it all.
Before the first river found its way to the sea, before the first star burned its name into the darkness of space, before the first human voice rose to ask its first question, there was a presence. Not a god born from another god's prayer. Not a force conjured by the fear of storms or the hope of harvest. Something else entirely. Something that had no beginning, because it was the beginning itself. His name has been spoken in more languages, in more centuries, in more corners of this earth than perhaps any other name in human history. Shiva. Today, more than 1 billion people on this planet consider Shiva to be the supreme reality, the source from which all creation flows, and the force to which all creation must one day return. He is worshipped as Mahadeva, the great god, as Nataraja, the lord of the cosmic dance, as Adiyogi, the first yogi who ever lived, as Rudra, the howler, the storm, the untamable force at the edge of the world. He is the ascetic who sits in deathly stillness on the summit of Mount Kailash, and the dancer whose rhythm sustains the universe. He is the husband of the goddess, the father of Ganesha and Kartikeya, and the hermit who has no need of family, of shelter, of anything the world can offer. He carries a trident. He wears a crescent moon in his matted hair. Around his neck, a king cobra rests as peacefully as a sleeping child. He is contradiction, made divine. But where did he come from? Who was Shiva, truly, before the temples were built, before the scriptures were written, before the first priest spoke his name in ritual fire? That is the question this documentary was made to answer, and the answer is far older and far stranger than most people know. To find the beginning of Shiva, we must travel back more than 4,000 years, to the banks of the Indus River, in what is today Pakistan, where archaeologists in the 1920s unearthed the ruins of one of the largest cities of the ancient world, Mohenjo-Daro, a city of perhaps 50,000 people, with grid-planned streets, indoor plumbing, and a level of civic organization that would not be seen again in this region for another 2,000 years. These people had no name we know. They left no king lists, no war records, no great declarations of power. They simply lived for centuries in a society of extraordinary sophistication. And then, one day they were gone. Among the thousands of objects recovered from Mohenjo-Daro's ruins, one small artifact has fascinated scholars for nearly a century. It is a seal, a tiny carved stone, barely 3.5 centimeters wide. Seal number 420. But it contains an image that changed everything we thought we knew about the age of Shiva. On this seal, a figure sits in perfect stillness. His legs are folded beneath him, his heels pressed together, his toes pointing downward. His arms rest lightly on his knees, thumbs outward. He wears a great horned headdress. He may have 3 faces, each looking in a different direction. Past, present, and future, perhaps. And around him, arranged as though paying court to a king, 4 animals, an elephant, a tiger, a rhinoceros, a buffalo, and at his feet, 2 deer. The archaeologist who first described this figure, Sir John Marshall, was so struck by its resemblance to the god Shiva that he gave it a name immediately. Pashupati, Lord of Animals, one of the oldest and most sacred names of Shiva. If Marshall was right, this small stone seal is the oldest known image of Shiva in human history. Carved somewhere between 2500 and 2000 BCE, more than 4,000 years ago, before the Vedas were composed, before the Mahabharata was conceived, before the Puranas recorded his stories. Here, in the ruins of a forgotten civilization, someone pressed Shiva's image into stone and left it for us to find. Not all scholars agree that this is Shiva. The debate continues. Some argue the figure is too different from later Shiva iconography to be certain. Some suggest it could be a local deity whose traditions were absorbed into what would later become Shaivism. But even those scholars agree on the deeper truth, that the spiritual impulse that would become Shiva, the ascetic seated in meditation, the Lord who commands all living creatures, the being who sits outside the world even as he governs it. That impulse was already present in the human consciousness of the Indus Valley. Shiva did not begin with the Vedas. He may be older than written history itself. Think about what that means. When the great pyramids of Egypt were still being constructed, when the first cities of Mesopotamia were learning to write their names, on the banks of the Indus River. Someone was already meditating on this figure, already picturing him seated in that impossible stillness, already sensing that he was the lord of animals, of all things living and breathing and wild. The question of who first imagined Shiva may have no answer, because some presences are not imagined. Some presences are simply perceived. Around 1500 BCE, something shifted on the Indian subcontinent. The Vedic hymns, the Rig Veda, the oldest surviving texts in any Indo-European language, began to take shape, and in those hymns, among the many gods praised and invoked and feared, there was a god called Rudra. Rudra. The name itself tells us everything we need to know about how the ancient Vedic people related to this force. The word comes from the Sanskrit root rud, to howl, to roar, to cry out. Some scholars say it means the brilliant one, the one who shines red like fire. Others say it means simply the wild one. All of these meanings are true. In the Rig Veda, Rudra is addressed in only 3 hymns, a small presence compared to Indra, the storm king, or Agni, the god of sacred fire, who receives hundreds of hymns between them. But those 3 hymns are extraordinary, because in them the Vedic priests reveal something that sets Rudra completely apart from all the other gods they worshipped. They are afraid of him. The Vedic hymns to Rudra are not hymns of praise and celebration, they are hymns of supplication, of careful, respectful negotiation with a force that is powerful beyond all others and utterly unpredictable. The priests beg Rudra to go away. They ask him to aim his arrows somewhere else. They call him auspicious, not because they believe he is gentle, but because they hope that if they call him gentle often enough, he might become gentle. One hymn addresses him directly. Do not harm us in our children. Do not harm us in our grandchildren. Do not harm us in our lives. Do not harm us in cattle, in horses. Do not slay in your wrath our heroes, Rudra, for we always offer you rich oblations. This is not a love song to a friendly god. This is a prayer spoken by someone standing on the edge of a cliff in a storm, hoping the storm hears them. But notice something else. Even in these early hymns, Rudra is not only feared, he is also the healer. The Rig Veda calls him the physician of physicians. It says he carries 1,000 remedies in his hands. It says that among all the gods, his medicine is the most potent. Destruction and healing, terror and grace, the same hands that could kill could also cure. This paradox would define Shiva for the rest of human history. As the centuries passed, Rudra grew. In the Atharva Veda and the Yajur Veda, texts composed after the Rig Veda, his presence expanded dramatically. He was now known by many names: Sarva, Bhava, Nilakantha, the blue-throated one, Pashupati, Ugra, the ferocious, Mahadeva, Ishana. 8 names, 8 aspects, each one a different face of the same incomprehensible force. The Satapatha Brahmana, one of the great prose texts of the Vedic tradition, recorded all 8 names together and noted something remarkable. Each time the divine force was given a new name, it demanded a greater name still, as though this being could not be contained by any single title, as though every name humanity offered was too small. Rudra was not a god who fit comfortably into the Vedic order. He was not invited to the sacrificial fire with the other gods. He lived outside, on the boundary, in the cremation grounds and the forests and the wild places beyond the village. He was the outsider god, the god of the margins, and in that position, outside, beyond, unconstrained, something remarkable was happening. He was becoming greater than all the gods inside. Around 500 BCE, something extraordinary began to happen in the forests of ancient India. Scholars who had spent lifetimes studying the Vedic hymns began to ask a different kind of question. Not what should we sacrifice today, not which god controls the rain, but something deeper, something that had no ritual answer. What is the ultimate nature of reality? Out of that question came the Upanishads, the philosophical crown of the Vedic tradition. texts of breathtaking depth composed over several centuries that shifted the entire basis of Indian spirituality. And it was in one of these texts, the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, that the identification of Rudra with Shiva was stated for the very first time in writing. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad is dedicated entirely to Rudra Shiva, and it does not treat him as one god among many. It does not describe him as a storm deity to be feared or a healer to be petitioned. It calls him the supreme reality, the Brahman, the ultimate ground of all existence, wearing the form of Rudra. The text declares that Shiva is the creator of heaven and earth, that he is the witness at the heart of all things, that he is the Lord of time itself, Mahakala, the great force that swallows all ages. It says, "Know that the one Shiva, who governs every source, in whom this universe is gathered up and again dissolved, the Lord who grants grace, the one adorable one who is in the fire, the one who stands in the heart. Into him alone we enter." Do you understand what this means? In the span of roughly 1,000 years, from the earliest Vedic hymns to the Upanishads, Rudra had transformed completely. From a feared peripheral deity, a storm god addressed nervously from the edge of the ritual, to the supreme absolute, the one reality behind all realities, not a god among gods, the source from which all gods arise. How did this happen? The answer lies in something unique about Rudra's character that the Vedic people had always sensed but never quite been able to articulate. He was never domesticated, while the other Vedic gods were assigned portfolios. This one governs rain, this one governs fire, this one governs the sun. Rudra refused definition. He lived outside every boundary. He was associated with everything that existed beyond the village, beyond the ritual, beyond the comfortable categories of human civilization. And when Indian philosophy began, asking what lies beyond all categories, what cannot be defined, cannot be limited, cannot be contained by any concept, the answer pointed directly at Rudra. The god, who was always outside, was revealed in the end to be the deepest inside of all. His Shvetashvatara Upanishad also gave Shiva a name that would echo through all subsequent tradition: Mahadeva, the great god. Not great as in powerful, not great as in feared, great as in beyond the measure of greatness, beyond any standard by which greatness could be judged. But the philosophers were not the only ones exploring who Shiva truly was. In the same centuries when the Upanishads were being composed, another tradition of storytelling was taking shape: the Puranas, the ancient tales. And the Puranas did not approach Shiva through philosophy. They approached him through something far older than philosophy. They approached him through story. According to the Shiva Purana, the Linga Purana, and several other sacred texts, there came a moment, at the very beginning of this age of the cosmos, when the two greatest beings in all creation fell into conflict: Brahma, the creator, the four-faced Lord, whose lotus throne rests on the navel of Vishnu, who spoke the first syllables of the universe into being, and Vishnu, the preserver, who lies in eternal luminous sleep on the great cosmic ocean, upon whose body the very structure of the universe is sustained. These two beings, each of immeasurable power, began to argue. Who was greater? Who was the source? Who was supreme? The argument became a confrontation. The confrontation became something that shook the very foundations of the cosmos. The gods, watching from above, trembled. What would happen if these two great forces, each believing itself to be the origin of all, turned fully against each other? What would happen to creation if its creator and its preserver destroyed one another? And then, between them appeared a column of light, not a flame, not a sunrise, not any form of light that existed within the universe they both governed, an infinite pillar of blazing, radiant fire, stretching upward without end and downward without end, without beginning, without boundary, without a source that could be located anywhere. It simply was. Brahma and Vishnu forgot their argument completely. Something was here that made their argument meaningless. They looked at this column of fire and understood, wordlessly, that they were standing in the presence of something that neither of them could claim to be greater than. They made an agreement. Brahma would take the form of a swan and fly upward to find the top of this pillar. Whoever found the end of it would be declared supreme. Vishnu would take the form of a great boar, Varaha, and descend into the depths of existence to find its base. Brahma flew. For 1,000 years he flew upward, through heaven after heaven, through realms of light beyond light, and still the column burned above him without end. Vishnu descended. For 1,000 years he dove deeper, through darkness below darkness, through the roots of worlds and the floors of oceans, and still the column blazed below him without end. Finally, they returned. Vishnu returned first. He bowed to the column of light and declared honestly, "I could not find the base. Whatever this is, it is beyond me." But Brahma, in a moment of pride, in a moment of weakness that would cost him dearly, did not tell the truth. As he had been flying upward through those impossible heights, he had passed a Ketaki flower, drifting down from somewhere above, and he had asked that flower to testify falsely, to say it had seen him reach the top. Brahma stood before the column of light and said, "I have seen the summit." And then the column split open, and from within that infinite pillar of fire, a form emerged, a form that both Brahma and Vishnu recognized instantly, even though they had never seen him in this way before. Shiva, Mahadeva, and Shiva looked at Brahma, and Brahma could not meet his gaze. Because Shiva sees everything, the third eye, the eye of pure consciousness, sees through every lie, every pretense, every proud claim, every mask that creatures wear before the mirror of their own ambition. Brahma had claimed to have found the summit of something that has no summit. He had tried to put a limit on the limitless. He had tried to make the infinite small enough to be conquered. Shiva spoke. "Both of you were born from me. Brahma, you have lied, and you will bear the consequence of that lie. There will be no temple built in your name, no worship offered to you among the peoples of this earth." And the Ketaki flower, the false witness, was banned from all sacred offerings forever. But then Shiva turned to Vishnu, and he said, "You spoke the truth, and for that I grant you equality with me. You are my brother. We are one reality wearing two faces." The pillar did not disappear. It settled into the earth, and it became the Dvayotirlinga, the lingam of light, the aniconic form through which Shiva has been worshipped in 12 sacred places across India ever since. This story, told in the Shiva Purana and the Linga Purana and the Vayu Purana and half a dozen other ancient texts, contains something that no amount of philosophy alone could convey. The nature of Shiva cannot be found by going up. The nature of Shiva cannot be found by going down. It cannot be found by any effort, any search, any claim of achievement. It can only be found by stopping the search entirely, by returning, by bowing, by telling the truth. The philosophers found Shiva in the idea of the Absolute. The storytellers found him in the drama of the cosmos. But there is a third tradition, one that may be the oldest of all, that found him in a very different place. Not in a text, not in a pillar of fire, but in a man sitting alone on a mountain. In the yogic tradition, the tradition of inner science that is perhaps the most sophisticated contribution India ever made to human knowledge. Shiva is not primarily a god. He is Adiyogi, the first yogi. The accounts of the yogic lineage say that more than 15,000 years ago, a being attained a state of experience so complete, so total, so beyond anything another human had ever achieved that the very nature of what it means to be alive was transformed in him. He had touched something that had no name in any language. He had gone beyond every boundary that the human system normally recognizes, beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond even the sense of being a separate self, and found something that was not describable. Because it was everything. When this state came upon him, he could not contain it. He danced with a wildness that shook the earth, and then the dancing became so intense, so absolute, that it could no longer move, and he became utterly, completely still. For months, perhaps years, he sat in that stillness on the high peaks of the Himalayas. He was not meditating in the way a student meditates, trying to achieve something. He had already achieved everything there was to achieve. He simply was. Word spread, the way word always spreads in a world where something extraordinary has appeared. People came from great distances to see this man. Some came out of curiosity, some out of spiritual longing, some simply because they had heard that something impossible was happening on the mountain. They came, they waited, and he did not notice them. The man on the mountain was not being rude. He was not ignoring them out of pride or indifference. He simply had no awareness of the distinction between himself and the world around him. He had dissolved into the whole. There was no separate observer inside him left to notice the people waiting below. One by one, the people who had come gave up and left. They could not understand what they were seeing. It made no sense to them. They went back to their lives, but 7 men did not leave. 7 men understood, or at least sensed, that what they were witnessing was not madness and not illness. It was the highest possible state of human existence, and they wanted to know how to find it themselves. They began to prepare, not by arguing with him or demanding his attention, simply by preparing themselves, making themselves worthy of the transmission they were asking for. Day after day, week after week, month after month, season after season, they disciplined themselves completely. They were not performing for an audience. The man on the mountain still did not see them. They were preparing because they understood that to receive something infinite, the vessel must be made as clean and as open as possible. The accounts say they did this for 84 years. 84 years. Most human lives in the ancient world were not much longer than that. These 7 men gave everything, and then, one day, on the day when the sun completed its northern run and began its journey south, the moment that yogic tradition calls Dakshinayana, the man on the mountain moved. He opened his eyes, and he saw them. He looked at these 7 men, and what he saw in them moved him in a way that nothing in the outer world could. They were shining. They had become, through their years of preparation, vessels of such transparency that the very light of awareness could move through them without distortion. They were not ready to understand everything he had experienced, but they were ready enough. On the next full moon, the day that yogic tradition still observes as Guru Purnima, the day of the first guru, he turned south. This is why one of his most important forms is called Dakshinamurti, the one who faces south, the one who turned toward the human race to offer them the ultimate science. And he began to teach, not through words primarily, through transmission, through the direct communication of experience from one being to another, in ways that cannot be fully captured in any text, but also through words, through the systematic mapping of the human interior that would eventually be encoded in texts like the Shiva Sutras and the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra, 112 methods by which a human being can realize the ultimate nature of what they are. After many years, the transmission was complete, and the 7 men who had waited 84 years were no longer the same men who had begun waiting. They had become fully illuminated beings. The Saptarishis, the 7 sages, celebrated and honored in Indian tradition to this day. Shiva sent them in 7 different directions, each carrying a different dimension of the science he had shared. One went to Central Asia, one to North Africa, one to South America, one to the Far East, one to the islands of the Pacific. The knowledge was seeded across the entire earth. And this is why, If you look closely at the spiritual traditions of cultures separated by entire oceans, you find the same questions being asked, the same inner technologies being used, the same maps of human consciousness being drawn. Because they all trace back, the yogic tradition says, to the same source. To one man sitting still on a mountain, to the first yogi, to Adiyogi, to Shiva, from the Pashupati seal of Mohenjo-Daro, to the terrifying merciful Rudra of the Rig Veda, to the supreme absolute of the Upanishads, to the infinite pillar of light of the Puranas, to the first yogi seated in enlightenment on the Himalayan peaks. The being called Shiva has taken more forms, absorbed more meanings, spoken to more dimensions of human experience than perhaps any other deity in the history of the world. And this is not an accident. It is the deepest thing about Shiva. He is the God who contains everything, including the things that cannot be contained. He is the householder and the wanderer, the destroyer and the regenerator, the ascetic who burns desire to ash, and the lover whose passion for Parvati is the very engine of creation. He is time itself, Mahakala, the great time before which every moment rises and passes, and he is also what is beyond time, Mahadeva, the great consciousness that existed before the first moment and will exist after the last. Look at his form, and you see this totality expressed in symbol. The crescent moon in his hair is time in its phases, waxing and waning, birth and death, the endless rhythm of the cosmos. The river Ganga flowing from his matted locks is the grace that descends from the highest place to sustain the world below, the mercy of the infinite toward the finite. The cobra around his neck is Vasuki, king of serpents, the symbol of primordial energy coiled and waiting. Shiva wears death as an ornament because death has no power over him. He has already been there and come back, in the deepest sense possible. The third eye, the eye of wisdom, the eye of fire, that burns on his forehead, is consciousness itself. The awareness that sees through every illusion, that cannot be deceived, that perceives the truth at the center of all things. And the ash that covers his body, Bhasma, the sacred ash of the cremation ground, the ash of everything that has ever burned and passed, he wears as a reminder that all forms are temporary, all names are temporary, all things return to ash. But Shiva is not the ash. He is the fire, and also the witness of the fire, and also the stillness that the fire burns inside. Why has this figure survived for 4,000 years, at minimum? Why, in a world that has changed beyond recognition, in a world that has overturned nearly every belief it once held, does Shiva still stand? Why do 1 billion people today still look at that ancient form and feel something that cannot be named? Perhaps because Shiva represents something that does not change, not a belief system, not a set of rules, not a promise about what happens after death, but a recognition that at the center of all things, beneath all the noise and movement and anxiety of life as a human being, there is a stillness so complete that it is not broken by anything, not by pleasure, not by pain, not by time, not by loss. And that stillness is not empty. It is the fullest thing there is. Every civilization that has ever existed has asked the same question. Is there something beneath all this? Beneath the change, beneath the loss, beneath the beauty that does not last and the pain that comes without warning, is there something that simply is? The people of Mohenjo-Daro looked at that question and carved a figure into stone. Seated, still, surrounded by living creatures, lord of all animals, master of the living world but somehow outside it, untouched by it. The Vedic priests heard the question, roaring in the storm, and called it Rudra. The Upanishadic sages sat with the question in the forest until they could see that the question and the questioner were made of the same substance. The Puranic storytellers put the question into the most cosmic drama they could imagine. Two great gods searching the infinite for an end that does not exist. And the yogic tradition said, do not search, stop, sit, become still enough that the stillness finds you. Shiva was never born. Shiva will never die. He is the question and the answer, existing in the same moment. He is the dance that keeps the universe alive, and the stillness that the dance has never disturbed. He is the pillar of light with no top and no bottom. He is the ash and the fire and the witness of the fire. He is the first yogi who ever sat in the Himalayas and found, in the depths of his own inner silence, the thing that holds the cosmos together. Before the universe breathed, he was already here.
There is a king whose name is carved into the Mahabharata, the Vishnu Purana, the Shiva Purana. And yet almost no one tells his full story. He carried a mountain on his spine. He let poison pour from his own mouth. He watched his people burn, name by name, and could not stop it. And through all of it, he never asked for anything in return. Not power, not glory, not even to be remembered. Lord Krishna himself, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, speaking to all of humanity across all of time, stopped and said, "Among serpents, I am Vasuki." That one line should tell you everything, but it tells you nothing unless you know the story behind it. Today, we go there. Vasuki was born in the lineage of Maharishi Kashyap and his wife Kadru, the mother of all serpents. From her, thousands of Nagas came into being. Sheshnag, Takshak, Karkotaka, Padma. A great and ancient clan, older than most of what we call civilization. But Vasuki was different from the beginning. You may know Sheshnag, the cosmic serpent, whose infinite coils form the bed on which Lord Vishnu rests, and upon whose hoods the weight of the entire earth is balanced. Sheshnag is the symbol of eternal patience, of holding, of endurance without complaint. Vasuki is something else. If Sheshnag is the stillness beneath existence, Vasuki is the one who moves into the fire. He became the Nagaraj, the king of the Nagas. His realm was Naglok, a hidden kingdom in the depths of Patal Lok, described in the texts as luminous with gems, alive with ancient knowledge, filled with rivers that carried not water but wisdom. And over all of it, Vasuki ruled with something rare in kings of any age: equal justice. The small Naga and the great one stood in the same court. The same Dharma applied to both. He is described with a Nagamani, a jewel upon his forehead that lit all of Naglok without need of sun or fire. 9 hoods, each representing a different direction of power. And eyes that, if you met them, made you remember your own wrongdoings. Not with shame, but with clarity. The gaze of a just king. But here is the thing about Vasuki's inner life that the texts quietly reveal. He was not interested in power for its own sake. From the very beginning, what he wanted was something simpler and something far more difficult. He wanted to serve. In the early days of Naglok, when Vasuki was still young in his kingship, he heard about Mahadeva, not the sanitized version, not Shiva, the gracious deity sitting comfortably in a temple. He heard about that Shiva, the one who smears cremation ash on his body, who chooses to live among the dead in the forests that others flee from, who holds destruction and compassion in the same hand and calls it the same thing. Something in Vasuki recognized that. Something in him said, "This is the truth I have been looking for." He went to the Himalayas. He found a cave and he sat down. The penance he undertook was severe. The texts use the word go, which means something beyond what the body should survive. No food, no water. Months passed into years. Storms broke over the mountain. Snow buried the cave entrance. Termites moved across his scales. And still, the mantra continued. Om Namah Shivaya, a current running beneath every breath, beneath every silence. And then one day, because Shiva always comes for those who truly call, the earth shook. The sky broke open in a strange thunder, and Mahadeva stood before him. Ganga flowing through matted locks, the crescent moon cool on his forehead, ash on his skin like starlight, and in his eyes, that particular quality of Shiva's gaze that sees through everything you have built around yourself, straight into what you actually are. Shiva looked at Vasuki and said, "Your devotion has drawn me here. Ask, what do you desire?" Vasuki was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "My lord, I want nothing. Only this, that I may always remain near you." Think about that. A king, a being of extraordinary power, sitting before the source of all boons. And what he asked for wasn't sovereignty over new realms, not immortality, not weapons or wealth or influence, just proximity, just the right to serve. Shiva was silent. Then, "Tathastu, from today, you will become the ornament of my neck." And so Vasuki, king of the Nagas, took his place coiled around the throat of Mahadeva, where he remains in every image, in every Shiva linga, in every temple across the world to this day. Still there, still holding, still choosing nearness over everything else. But devotion, in the Hindu philosophical tradition, is never simply a feeling. It is tested. Repeatedly, as if the universe needs to confirm that what you carry is real. Vasuki's test came with a task that no one else could do, and that anyone with self-preservation instincts would have refused. The gods had lost their divine power to a sage's curse. The demons had seized the heavens. Lord Vishnu offered a solution. Churn the Saga, the cosmic ocean of milk. From its depths would rise Amrit, the nectar that cannot be exhausted, the immortality that cannot be revoked. But the churning required Mount Mandarakala as the rod, and the rod required a rope. Brahma said, only Vasuki could serve as that rope. The gods and demons came to Naglok together, a strange alliance born of shared need. They stood before the Nagaraj and asked him to offer his own body as a tool, to wrap himself around a mountain, to be pulled from both ends by beings far less scrupulous than himself. Vasuki understood exactly what was being asked. He was not naive about the pain it would involve. The weight of Mandarakala pressing into his spine, the tearing from both sides, the possibility that his body would simply give out before the churning was done. He was silent for a moment. Then, "I am ready." The churning began. The gods stood on the tail side, Vishnu's quiet wisdom at work, placing them there deliberately. The demons on the head side, thinking themselves more powerful for it. They didn't understand that as the friction grew and the spinning intensified, the smoke and fire would pour from Vasuki's mouth, and it would pour directly into their faces. Vasuki didn't even know he was protecting the gods. He was simply enduring. The mountain turned. The ocean heaved. The pressure on his body was unlike anything the scriptures describe in physical terms. They simply say that Vasuki bore it, that he did not cry out, that he did not ask for the churning to stop. And from the depths, creation began to release its gifts. Kamadenu, the wish-fulfilling cow. Uchai the divine horse. Airavata, the white elephant. Kalpavriksha, the Apsaras. Lakshmi herself, rising on a lotus. Dhanvantari, carrying the vessel of Amrit. And then, something else. The water blackened. A smell unlike anything living reached the gods first. They stepped back before they understood why. Then the surface broke open, and what rose was Hala Hala, the Calcut venom. The poison that had accumulated in the depths of all creation since the beginning of time. A substance so lethal that its mere proximity began to wither the trees, silence the birds, boil the ocean. Both gods and demons fled, and Vasuki was still there, still wrapped around the mountain. He had given his word, and his word to him was not negotiable. He breathed the halahala. He felt it move through his scales, and he stayed. Everyone called for Shiva, and Shiva came. He lifted the halahala in his palm, held it there for one terrifying moment for all the worlds to see, then drank it. Parvati caught his throat. The poison stayed there, neither going down nor coming back. His neck turned blue, and so began the name that echoes through every prayer. Neelkant. In that moment, Vasuki was coiled around that very throat. He felt the poison his god had drunk. He felt the stillness of Shiva holding death inside himself and not being moved by it. And something in Vasuki, already broken from the churning, already carrying the weight of the mountain in his bones, something in him simply held tighter, not in panic, in love. But the hardest chapter of Vasuki's story is not the churning. It is not Tripura Dahan, where he became the string of Shiva's bow so that 3 demon cities could be destroyed with a single arrow. It is not even the Mahabharata, where his blessing doubled Bhima's already mythic strength. The hardest chapter is the one that came from his own home, his own blood. Kadru, his mother, made a bet with her stepsister Vinata over the color of a divine horse's tail. When she realized she was about to lose, she commanded her Naga children to coil themselves on the horse's tail and make it appear black. A lie disguised as obedience. Many Nagas refused. They said, "This is sin. We will not do it." Kadru cursed them. In her rage, their own mother cursed her children, sentenced them all to die in fire. Vasuki was king. He bore that knowledge quietly. A king often has to carry the weight of what he cannot undo. And then, generations later, it came true. King Janamejaya, consumed by grief over his father Parikshit's death at the fangs of Takshak, initiated the Sarpa Yajna, the serpent sacrifice, a ritual of absolute annihilation, where mantras were recited, names were called, and each name serpent, wherever it was in the 3 worlds, was pulled by invisible force directly into the fire. The fire roared, and the names began. Vasuki sat in Naglok and listened. Name by name, face by face, a servant from his court, a friend of his brother, a child who had only just learned to speak. Into the fire, into the fire, into the fire. He who had not wept through the pain of Samudra Manthan. He who had not flinched when Shiva drank poison against his scales. He wept. And in his grief, he asked the question that perhaps you too have asked in your own life. In whatever language, in whatever moment of helplessness, must the children always pay for the sins of those who came before them? Can one lie, one moment of weakness, truly erase an entire lineage? He closed his eyes. He remembered Shiva, and he prayed, not the formal prayer of ritual, but the raw prayer of a king who has run out of options. The answer came not from above, but from within his own family. Long ago, Brahma had told him, "Your sister Jaratkaru will bear a son named Astika, and Astika will be the one." Vasuki turned to his sister Manasa Devi, herself weeping, herself burning, and said quietly, "Sister, your son is our last hope." Astika arrived at the Yajna site, young, radiant, filled with Vedic knowledge so deep and precise that King Janamejaya stopped the ritual just to listen. Pleased, the king offered a boon. Astika asked for one thing only. Stop the Yajna. The fire died. The names stopped. The Nagas were saved. And Vasuki, the king who had moved mountains, who had held creation together as a rope, who had been a weapon and an ornament and a witness, fell at the feet of his young nephew and said, "You have given life to my entire lineage. I am forever in your debt." A king, bowing to a child, because that child had done what all his power could not. That is what Dharma looks like when it is real. It doesn't calculate status. It honors the source of grace, wherever it comes from. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, with armies facing each other across a field of unthinkable consequence, Arjuna broke down. The Gandiva fell. His hands trembled. Krishna spoke. He revealed his Virat Swarupa, the cosmic form that contains all of existence, and walked Arjuna through it. He named the greatest of everything. Among gods, I am Indra. Among rivers, I am the Ganga. Among mountains, I am the Meru. And then, among serpents, I am Vasuki. Not Sheshnag, who holds the earth. Not Takshak, who is feared across the three worlds. Vasuki, the one who asked for nothing. The one who endured without complaint. The one who wept for his people in private and found a way forward anyway. When God says, I am this, he isn't simply listing the powerful. He's pointing to a particular quality that he recognizes as divine. In Vasuki, that quality was this: the willingness to serve beyond what serving costs you. To hold the mountain even when your spine is breaking. To stay near your God even when your God is drinking poison. That quality, Krishna was saying, is not ordinary. That quality is me. Every year in the month of Shravan, Nag Panchami is observed. Milk is offered to serpents, prayers are spoken, and in every temple, coiled around every Shiva linga, there he is. Still. Vasuki, still holding, still there. We tend to remember the gods who blazed, who fought and won and returned in triumph. Those stories are necessary. They give us courage. But Vasuki's story gives us something else. It gives us the permission to serve without recognition, to stay when staying is painful, to hold tighter when everything in the situation tells us to let go. Most of us will never churn a cosmic ocean, but most of us know what it is to carry something heavy, a responsibility, a grief, a family burden we did not choose, and to keep going anyway, to keep showing up. Not because the reward is coming, but because this is who we are. Vasuki did not become divine because he performed great deeds. He performed great deeds because he had already decided, quietly, in a Himalayan cave, alone, what he was willing to give, and to whom, and without condition. That decision is available to all of us, every single day. If Vasuki's story moved something in you, write it in the comments. Not just Jai Vasuki. Tell me which moment. Was it the penance, the churning, the names falling into the fire? Those comments become the next video. Your questions shape this channel. Subscribe and press the bell, because the next journey is already being prepared. We go next into the world of Sheshnag, Takshak, and the hidden history of Naglok. Until then, Jai Mahadeva. I'll see you there.
Shiva is not a god we worship from fear. He is a principle we awaken within ourselves, the courage to let go, the wisdom to transform, the compassion to sacrifice for others. In Vasuki's penance, in the drinking of poison, in the alliance of all forces, we see the Dharma of the divine revealed. And still, the dance continues. In every breath you take, in every moment you choose transformation over stagnation, you honor the eternal Lord. Namaste. The divine in me bows to the divine in you.